Hello, people watching. Welcome to Ship Talk YouTube. That is ship with a P, not the other word. I talk about spaceships, and that you can easily conflate it with another word, but please don't. Anyway, today we are talking about the Chandley class. Now, what is the Chandley? Well, it's obviously this. I did do a video about this ship not too long ago, but also relatively, hopefully long enough ago that you won't realize that I'm reusing artwork. But it's a really interesting ship. We're not really getting so much into its service history and why it was made, yada yada yada, because we've done that in another video. But instead, what I want to do is I want to talk about why this ship is actually really interesting to me. Why I personally really like this class. Why I think the Chandley class is really cool and really unique and just different. What sets it apart in my mind. Because I know what you're thinking, this is basically a Miranda just about a decade or two early with, weird shoulders. And you'd be right for thinking that, but that's not actually what this ship is about. And, yeah, we're just going to talk about this thing and why it's weird, why I like it, and why I think it's one of the more unique ships in Starfleet. So let's get into that. So what is the Chandley class? Let's set that as a baseline. Well, the Chandley is a frigate class introduced into Starfleet in the mid-23rd century. As you can see, it has a lot of the same design cues as the original Enterprise. It's very similar, sort of component-wise. Similar saucers, similar nacelles. What sets it apart, obviously, is the sort of shoulder things and its more squat appearance. It doesn't have that secondary hull. So it's a frigate class in the period. And what sets it apart from a lot of frigates, there are sort of two things that set it apart. The first off is its size. The ship edges closer into what we would consider light cruiser size territory, so it's quite beefy for the period. And also the fact that it has a lot of shuttle carrying capacity. So you can see aft, there's actually quite a lot of shuttle bays. You have shuttle bays forward, and it just has an unusual amount of shuttle capacity. So when you compare it to something like the Lochnar class, which is its contemporary, within about a decade they're introduced in the same period. Lochnar doesn't have a lot of shuttle bays. Hopefully I remember to put a picture of the Lochnar. And she's also a lot smaller. So she's slighter built, she's smaller overall. Chandley is this big, beefy ship. Very sort of stocky looking. So those are the two sort of big deals. But of course, what that extra bulk and shuttle bay capacity gets you, you can't really tell just from looking at it. Because if you look at it, it looks like a Starfleet ship from the 23rd century, the same time as the original series. But yeah, so the ship was introduced mid-23rd century. It was introduced sort of after the period known as the 4 Years' War. We're going off of sort of prior Discovery canon just because that's easier than the mess that is Discovery, although Strange New Worlds isn't that bad. Anyway, yeah, so the ship sort of introduced after that period, and yeah, she's really quite unique, and let's get into why. Okay, so the obvious question is, what is a frigate, which is traditionally a sort of lighter built, less well-armed, shorter-ranged ship meant mostly for internal duties, doing with all of this size and all of this lifting capacity? Lochnar, of course, much lighter built, shorter-ranged, intended for missions within the Federation space. If you want to get to the sort of exploratory roles like Enterprise does or other cruisers, you need a lot more size. You need more room, all these things. And also, why does the ship have basically the lifting capacity of a heavy cruiser on that frame? That's still relatively small. She's not full-on heavy cruiser size. but she is quite bulky, and she has a lot of that internal volume devoted to hangars. So the thing we have to keep in mind during this period is that this is still the early days. There are still a lot of colonies out there and a lot of piracy. And a lot of these colonies are contending with the fact that they are newly established and that there's pirates. So in that scenario, Chandley makes a lot of sense. Because what you need with these newly established colonies is that every now and then you need a ship that can come in and she can show up, she can launch a bunch of shuttles, she can rescue colonists from this island that turned out to be a giant turtle and is submerging slowly. It can, you can send the ship to a new colony world that is experiencing a significant emotional event in the form of meteorite impacts that you didn't see coming, or solar flares, and you can get those colonists off. So in that sense, she's a sort of rescue vessel, because as a frigate, she can do normal frigate-y stuff, but also, when you need heavy lifting capacity, you have this design available, this ship available. You don't necessarily need to build a lot of them, but they are there to do sort of colonial support. And something like USS Kelvin that we see in Star Trek 2009 actually fulfills a lot of those same roles, at least as far as my internal headcanon goes, that she's a sort of earlier colonial support survey ship, so she can go in and do the same roles that Chandley can, just newer, or older rather, and less well armed. So that's the first reason behind her construction. But notice, remember, cast your mind back to the distant year of 3 minutes ago, and I mentioned pirates. And pirates are still a big problem in the 23rd century. Starfleet isn't as well established in the frontier regions. The Orion syndicates are still very active, far more so than they would be in the past, or in the future. There are a lot of sort of Orion pirate kingdoms and pirate clans around. The Nausicaans are around. And other groups are engaging in privateering work against Starfleet and Starfleet installations. So you do see things like the Klingons making attacks against Starfleet Federation targets as well. And what that means is not only are you contending with these small, fast pirate ships, but you're also contending with ships that pirates have taken. So freighters where pirates have shown up, they've boarded, they've captured a ship, and they're bringing it home, and you're trying to stop them. So those two mission profiles are radically different. If you're fighting a pirate ship, you typically need to be relatively fast. You don't need to be terribly heavily armed. You should be well defended, and you should probably have tractor beams. Once the pirate ship is disabled, if it's disabled and isn't destroyed or self-destructs, then you do need a marine contingent to safely board the ship and overpower her crew. But in a scenario where you are taking a ship that pirates have captured, it's a little bit different, because then you need more crew. You need more sort of boots on the ground as it is. You also have to remember that occasionally you're going to be dealing with things like, I don't know if I can say it here, but Anakin's initial job from birth until the age of about 9 in Star Wars. That kind of thing. The Orions have their pretty green women that are girls. So occasionally you're dealing with sort of markets of sentient beings where you're going to need large carrying capacity to bring these unwilling livestock out, but also a lot of sort of boots on the ground with guns to deal with the people that have done that. And to that sense, it makes sense to that mission, it makes sense to build something like Chandley, where basically you're never in these areas, you're unlikely to go against something that is going to pose a serious threat to a cruiser. But also, there are plenty of scenarios where you need troops, but not as many troops as something like a full-on assault ship. There are assault ships in the period, and they're intended to show up to a heavily defended planet, batter down its shields and defensive installations, and then deploy thousands of ground troops or hundreds. Chandley doesn't need that. Chandley is just based around the concept of having basically frigate-level firepower, so lower-powered phasers and photon torpedo magazines that aren't terribly deep, that is sufficient to deal with light threats, as well as maybe 200 Marines, and the equipment to get them on the planet. So she's sort of combining the role of frigate and very small assault ship in that level, while also being a sort of colonial support ship if needed. So she's really this small, multi-purpose vessel. And because she can do these different roles, it means that she's a sort of, decent enough at many different missions. She's not a master at any one role, but she is, good enough. She can do all these missions, and basically what it means is that Starfleet, which is very, very short on these dedicated ships in the period, you don't have heavy cruisers to spare doing this mission, doing these sorts of missions, because they're out on the very, very frontier. You might be a few hundred light years within the Federation, but you still have, because it's the wild days, it's still this sort of frontier mentality. The Federation hasn't permeated in every area that it controls yet. You're still contending with these groups. It's this patchwork. So you can't spare heavy cruisers from the front lines because, they're needed for other jobs. You can't spare maybe dedicated surveyors, things like USS Kelvin, because they're being used to establish colonies. But sometimes you need a smaller ship to support a colony after it's been established. And at the same time, you don't have enough assault ships to spare for every small Orion pirate base, because there's not that many assault ships, because Starfleet isn't building large numbers of assault ships. So in that context, Chandley makes a lot of sense in this sort of, she can do the colonial support mission if she needs to, she can do the anti-piracy patrols if she needs to, and she can do the sort of pirate base assault if she needs to. She can also do normal frigate roles. So she really is this multi-purpose ship. And that's kind of what makes her really, really unique, that Starfleet is basically cramming a lot of capability into this very small hull, but it also makes sort of directly amounts to why she's not built in large numbers. Because she has all of this capability, she is expensive. And again, when I say expense, I don't mean money, because apparently the Federation doesn't have money, which is a nice thought, but I don't know how that would work in reality. But anyway, it's the future, so I'm willing to believe that we have created a better system than, money and all its evils. But when I refer to budget, I mean like resources and time and, human experience required to make it work. Not even human experience, but, sentient effort. And, because she costs that much, we don't really know how much she costs, but probably in the ballpark of a light cruiser or heavy cruiser, and she's built to do these sort of secondary roles, you don't see many of them built. Largely, maybe in a more peacetime environment you could have, although then maybe you just would have built more like heavy cruisers, but Starfleet is interested in fighting the hot peace with the Klingon Empire, a Cold War with the Romulans. You have other groups that you're contending with. So you basically decide that more of these cheaper frigate and destroyers is a better investment. And because of that, you don't build that many Chandley-class ships. You don't. But they are still very, very useful. I would recommend watching my video on the Chandley class. I probably won't link it in the description because, I probably won't, let's face it. But, it should be in a playlist somewhere. And, the Chandley class, watch the video to kind of go over its service life, because that kind of explains what happens, where basically they become very good anti-piracy ships, but also a victim of their own success. Where they're so good at fighting pirates that Starfleet kind of decides, well, they're only as good as a frigate in most scenarios, and except this one sort of anti-piracy niche, and they were so good at the anti-piracy niche that they've effectively removed the niche from existence. So these are really the ships that are responsible for ending sort of piracy and the prisoners with jobs trade from Federation space. So they're a really interesting ship in my mind. I really like them. I think the Chandley is hideous looking because it has these weird, like, shoulder hunchback. I don't like how it looks personally, but I think it's a really unique kind of ship. And I also believe it's from out of universe, from to wrap things up here. I believe the ship came from the sort of FASA universe, Starfleet Battles, the Starship Tactical Combat Simulator. Maybe I'm looking at my copy and I might flip through it later. But yeah, it's such a cool little design. It shows a sort of different side to Starfleet because so many Starfleet ships are either heavy cruisers like, Enterprise. We have in the 23rd century, we have just Constitution, but then in the 24th century, we see the Galaxy class, the Nebula class that is basically the same thing. We see the Sovereign class, the Akira, which is a little bit smaller but still very similar. We see, just Picard has all of these ships in it that are all basically heavy cruisers or sort of smaller multi-purpose ships. We don't really see these weird kind of oddball designs where there's just a few of them built, they serve sort of a niche mission, they do that mission, and just sort of carry on. And I really like that as this sort of weird oddball design that sort of made its own niche and then made the niche irrelevant by doing its job a little too well. So yeah, that's sort of all I've got today video-wise, so thank you very, very much for watching. Feel free to subscribe. As I say, maybe give the earlier Chandley video a watch because, it's a cool ship. I like it. If you do like the video, and now we're getting into the video conclusions, because this has been a long video where I just basically talk, and that can be a problem. Let me know if it's a problem or a good thing, because it feels like a problem. But, yeah, you can click in the description. I do have a Patreon, and basically all the artwork I use for my videos can be found in Patreon. It's free, readily available. You don't have to subscribe to the Patreon to get the artwork, but you also do things like you get videos early, you get sort of votes on what ships to cover in videos, sort of once a month you get a vote. I didn't do one for this month. Anyway, sometimes if I'm intelligent and don't forget, like I apparently did, you can get a vote. Yeah. I feel bad about that now. C'est la vie. But, yeah, you can do that. What else? Yeah, just to wrap things up kind of quick. I did go to New York to visit family, not like the city, not like Manhattan or, Long Island or nothing like that, but upstate, sort of Albany area. And, yeah, that was cool. But as a result, I basically worked a week of long days, and then did that, and then am currently working a week of long days, so I've not had as much time, hence why I'm throwing together this video with artwork that hopefully isn't so recently in your mind that you're like, it's that old video again. That's the hope. Let me know if it was successful. But yeah, as always, thank you for watching, even if it is, warmed over slop sometimes. Yeah, that's how that goes. And yeah, have a nice day, I guess.